Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. The most underestimated person in the room is usually the one who already knows how it ends. Here's the uncomfortable fact most people don't like to admit. Human beings are terrible at recognizing intelligence when it doesn't look familiar. If brilliance doesn't announce itself with confidence, credentials, noise, or drama, it gets ignored. Studies in cognitive bias show that people consistently confuse visibility with competence, meaning the loudest, fastest, and most expressive person often gets mistaken for the smartest, while the quiet observer gets mentally filed under background character. That flaw alone has altered careers, power structures, and outcomes more times than we'll ever count. So when you chose the blank face, it wasn't passivity, it was strategy. You didn't hide because you were unsure, you hid because you understood something they didn't yet. People treat you based on the role they assign you, not the potential you carry. And once that role is set, they stop guarding themselves. They relax, they overshare, they underestimate timing. They move recklessly, thinking the game is simple, because they think you are. There's a strange advantage in being misread. You get access without resistance. You get information without interrogation. You get to watch people perform their entire playbook while believing no one is really paying attention. It's like being handed the answers while everyone else is still bragging about how hard the test is. And yes, there's a dark kind of humor in watching people confidently explain things to you that you already solved 3 steps ago, but you nod anyway, because interrupting would ruin the ending. By the time awareness finally hits them, that delayed, sinking realization, it's never dramatic. There's no apology, no announcement, just a sudden shift in tone, fewer jokes, shorter sentences, more careful movements. That's when they understand the truth too late. The person they dismissed wasn't absent. They were observing, and the blank face they laughed at wasn't empty. It was waiting. This isn't about silence. It's about control. It's about letting the room underestimate you long enough to hand you the advantage, and only realizing who you were when the board is already set and every escape route quietly disappears. Number 1. You let them misclassify you on purpose. Most people panic when they're misunderstood. They rush to explain themselves, to correct the story, to fix the label before it sticks. You didn't. You noticed the label forming and stepped back instead of forward. That wasn't insecurity. That was awareness. You understood that the moment people think they have you figured out, they stop paying real attention. And attention, once relaxed, becomes careless. Letting yourself be misclassified is uncomfortable because it requires swallowing your ego daily. You have to watch people talk down to you, make assumptions about your limits, or treat you like you're a step behind. That stings. But you tolerated it because you knew something deeper. People behave honestly around those they don't feel threatened by. They reveal how they think, how they move, and where they cut corners. They stop performing. While they were busy placing you in a box that made them feel safe, you were quietly studying how they operate when they think no one important is watching. Who rushes decisions? Who needs validation? Who folds under pressure? Who lies when they feel comfortable? You weren't collecting gossip, you were collecting patterns, and patterns are far more valuable than opinions. Misclassification gives you freedom, no expectations to maintain, no image to defend, no pressure to prove anything in real time. You can make mistakes without consequences, ask questions without suspicion, and stay silent without being interrogated. Meanwhile, the people who needed to look impressive trapped themselves. They had to keep talking, keep winning, keep showing their hand just to stay relevant. The real advantage comes later, when it finally matters, when decisions have weight and outcomes are irreversible. That's when you move. Not dramatically, not loudly, but precisely. And that's when confusion hits them. because the version of you they built in their head can't explain what's happening. Their confidence collapses, not because you changed, but because they realize they never saw you clearly in the first place. You didn't deceive them with lies, you let them deceive themselves. And that's the cleanest strategy there is. Number 2, your blankness wasn't emptiness, it was compression. People saw the stillness, the quiet, the calm expression, and they assumed nothing was happening behind your eyes. They thought your blank face meant you were simple, disengaged, maybe even easy to manipulate. They were wrong. What they called emptiness was actually intense mental compression. Every observation, every interaction, every slip of the tongue, every gesture from them was recorded, analyzed, and stored in a way they could never perceive. You weren't passive. You were compressing information, folding it into patterns, making connections they couldn't even begin to notice. While they were busy showing off, arguing over small victories, and trying to be heard, you were watching the architecture of their decisions. You could see where consistency ended and self-interest began. You noted the contradictions they never noticed in themselves. You catalogued the predictable mistakes that only show up when someone assumes they're being clever. And all the while, you kept the blank face, because revealing even a fraction of this awareness would have shattered the advantage. Compression is not just about observation, it's about energy. People waste energy trying to impress, to dominate, to control the narrative. You weren't wasting yours. Every thought, every emotion, every reaction was carefully packed away, not for show, but for leverage. And leverage, unlike noise, waits patiently. It doesn't need applause, it doesn't need acknowledgement. It only needs timing. By the time the moment arrived to act, the depth you carried in silence became undeniable. What they assumed was nothing suddenly became unignorable. Their mistakes, their overconfidence, their misjudgments, all aligned perfectly with the mental framework you had been building quietly, invisibly. And in that alignment, your so-called blankness revealed itself for what it really was. A reservoir of insight, patience, and foresight that they had no way to measure. Their shock didn't come from surprise. It came from realization. Realization that everything they underestimated, everything they laughed at, had actually been a calculated accumulation of understanding, waiting for the perfect moment to unfold. Your blank face wasn't empty. It was compressed power, and they were already inside a game they didn't even know they were playing. Number 3. You never competed where the rules were stupid. Most people think success is about showing up, about pushing hard, about playing every game you're invited to. You didn't. You quickly realized that not all games are worth playing. Some arenas are designed to reward noise, ego, and shallow energy rather than skill, intelligence, or vision. Most people rush in because they want recognition, validation, or a quick win. You stepped back, quietly observing, knowing that the wrong battlefield will always burn the right people for the wrong reasons. By refusing to compete where the rules were stupid, you avoided the traps everyone else fell into. You didn't waste energy proving yourself to the unworthy. You didn't argue over points that didn't matter, or fight battles that were only symbolic. While others were busy exhausting themselves on meaningless contests, you were conserving focus, waiting for arenas where the stakes aligned with your ability. That's why you always moved faster and farther than they imagined. They were playing to be seen, while you were playing to win. The subtle genius of this approach is that it lets people misjudge your ambition. They see your absence and assume hesitation, weakness, or lack of drive. They don't realize that real strategy doesn't chase the spotlight. It finds leverage. It identifies where effort translates directly into results instead of applause. By letting others exhaust themselves, you gained clarity, patience, and freedom. You could watch mistakes accumulate, recognize patterns and anticipate outcomes without ever being trapped in their chaos. When the right moment arrived, your move hit harder because it came from preparation, not desperation. It wasn't loud, messy, or predictable. It was precise, surgical, and unavoidable. And the people who mocked your absence suddenly realized they had been playing a game designed for spectators, not players, while you had been silently mastering the moves that actually mattered. Not competing where the rules were stupid isn't laziness. It's calculation, it's restraint. And it's one of the most overlooked forms of power, because it doesn't announce itself until it's already too late for anyone else to catch up. You didn't just skip the wrong games. You used them as a backdrop to make your eventual victories inevitable. Number 4. You let them talk themselves into false superiority. Most people can't resist proving themselves when they sense someone quiet, composed, or unreadable. They feel the urge to assert dominance, to display knowledge, to flaunt control. You didn't stop them. You let them talk. You let them boast, argue, and parade their opinions like trophies. You allowed them to build an entire narrative in their head where they were superior, where they had the upper hand, where they understood the room and everyone in it. While they were busy inflating their importance, you were quietly watching, absorbing, and analyzing. Every confident claim, every overreach, every subtle lie or exaggeration became part of a bigger map of their thinking. They were revealing strategy, weakness, habits, and blind spots. Without realizing, they were giving it away. You didn't need to interrogate them. You didn't need to ask questions. Their words did the work for you, because confidence often masks the very gaps and contradictions that become leverage for someone patient and sharp. The beauty of letting them talk themselves into superiority is that it creates an invisible trap. The more they assert, the more they commit to positions they can't back up. The more they insist on being right, the more they expose exactly where they will fail when real pressure hits. And all the while, your calm, blank exterior convinces them you're a spectator at best, a minor player at worst. That misperception feeds their arrogance, which only accelerates the process. By the time they realize that their confidence was building your advantage, it's already too late. Every statement they made, every exaggeration, every demonstration of assumed power has been archived in your mind, ready to be applied in precise, unavoidable ways. They believed themselves untouchable because you didn't challenge them, and that belief became the mechanism of their own undoing. You didn't manipulate with force or confrontation. You manipulated through patience, observation, and allowing their ego to work against them. Letting them talk themselves into false superiority is a quiet kind of mastery. Invisible until it hits, irreversible once it lands, and impossible for them to undo. It's not just strategy, it's surgical. And they never even knew it was happening. Number 5. You mastered restraint while they confused motion for progress. Most people think that action equals achievement. They rush, react, and overcommit, because doing something, anything, makes them feel productive. They mistake noise for influence, movement for control, and speed for intelligence. You didn't fall into that trap. You mastered restraint. You understood that real power doesn't announce itself through constant activity. It shows up in timing, precision, and the ability to hold back when others can't. While they were spinning in a frenzy of tasks, arguments, and overextensions, you were still, not stagnant, but deliberate. Every observation, every analysis, every decision was calculated. You recognized that the world is full of people who exhaust themselves trying to prove relevance, and that exhaustion leaves openings. Openings you could exploit because you were conserving energy, focus, and clarity. Restraint became your secret engine. It let you see mistakes before they happened, anticipate reactions before they were made, and measure outcomes before anyone else even considered consequences. People around you were loud, urgent, and impulsive, but you treated their motion like background noise. They acted like chess pieces moving on autopilot, thinking that activity itself was strategy. You understood that true strategy is measured, not frantic. Waiting, observing, and doing only what matters meant that when the moment arrived, your move would land without resistance, because it came from patience, not panic. The restraint you practiced also made you unpredictable. They assumed you were slow, disengaged, or hesitant, but in reality you were waiting for leverage to line up perfectly. Their constant motion blinded them to the fact that they were creating the conditions for their own undoing. By the time you acted, the advantage you had built quietly and carefully was irreversible. Mastering restraint isn't about inaction. It's about control over energy, timing, and perception. It's the ability to watch chaos unfold and recognize that rushing in isn't progress, it's exposure. And while they celebrated their busyness, your silence, patience, and calculated stillness were shaping outcomes they wouldn't see coming until it was too late. That's how restraint turns patience into power. Number 6. You didn't correct their assumptions because you didn't need their approval. Most people panic when someone misunderstands them. They feel the urgent need to clarify, explain, and justify, as if being misjudged is a personal failure. You didn't. You knew that correcting someone's assumptions is only necessary if their opinion matters to you, and in most cases, it doesn't. Approval is overrated, and trying to earn it often costs more than it gives. You stayed quiet, letting others believe what they wanted, because you understood that their perception was their problem, not yours. By refusing to clarify, you gained freedom. You didn't have to play by their rules, defend your choices, or tip your hand to satisfy someone else's ego. Every attempt they made to pin you down, define you, or measure your ability became irrelevant because you never gave them a reason to doubt the version of you they had already accepted. They were busy building a narrative about you, and you were free to operate outside it, unnoticed and unpressured. Staying silent also allowed you to observe. People reveal more when they think their assumptions are accurate. They drop hints, expose weaknesses, overcommit to positions, and act carelessly, all because they believe you're aligned with the story they've created about you. Your silence became a tool, letting them reveal their strategies, blind spots, and patterns without ever suspecting that they were giving you advantage. Not correcting assumptions requires confidence, but it also requires timing. You don't intervene until leverage demands it. Until that point, letting people misread you is more valuable than proving yourself right. It builds an invisible lead, a quiet control over perception, and a mental map of everyone around you. When the moment comes to act, the same people who assumed they understood you are blindsided. Their surprise isn't caused by your action, it's caused by the fact that they never knew what they were missing. You didn't need to change their minds because you never needed their validation. By letting them operate in their own narrative, you kept the upper hand, and the checkmate comes naturally, silently, and irreversibly. Number 7. You studied outcomes, not opinions. Most people get caught up in what others think, in arguments, debates, and endless back and forths about who's right or wrong. They treat opinion like currency, thinking that convincing someone or winning an argument is proof of intelligence or control. You didn't. You focused on outcomes, on results that could be measured, observed, and leveraged. Opinions are cheap, fleeting, and often wrong. Outcomes are permanent, undeniable, and invaluable. That difference is what put you steps ahead while everyone else was busy talking. By prioritizing outcomes over opinions, you avoided wasting energy on debates that lead nowhere. You didn't chase validation or recognition. You didn't argue with people who were more concerned with being heard than being correct. Instead, you watched what actually worked. You tracked patterns, behaviors, decisions, and consequences, and you learned faster than anyone else because you weren't distracted by the noise of ego or perception. You understood that real power isn't proven in discussions. It's proven in results, in shifts that people can't ignore, in moves that make the board tilt quietly but irreversibly in your favor. This approach also made you nearly invisible while gathering intelligence. People freely exposed their weaknesses, revealed blind spots, and overcommitted to actions that seemed impressive but were ultimately flawed. You weren't there to judge or argue. You were there to record and anticipate. Every action, success, failure, and misstep became data points in a strategy they never suspected existed. When the moment came to act, you didn't just react. You leveraged the knowledge of what actually happens, not what people say should happen. Your moves were precise, impactful, and unstoppable because they were grounded in reality rather than perception. Meanwhile, those who relied on opinions were left scrambling, shocked that their assumptions led them into defeat. Studying outcomes over opinions isn't passive. It's mastery. It's the difference between being caught up in a story and being the author of the story's ending. It's invisible, it's relentless, and it always works when the right moment arrives. Number 8. You kept your intelligence unlinked from your identity. Most people tie their worth to their intelligence. They feel the need to prove they're smart, clever, or capable at every turn because their ego can't survive being underestimated. You didn't. You understood early that intelligence is a tool, not a badge. It doesn't need recognition, applause, or constant demonstration. By separating your identity from your intellect, you freed yourself from the pressures, traps, and distractions that enslave most people. Keeping your intelligence unlinked from your identity allowed you to move through the world unnoticed while gathering power quietly. People assume that if someone isn't showing off their mind, they must not have one. They mistake subtlety for weakness, silence for incompetence, and observation for lack of ability. That misperception became your greatest advantage. You could act without expectation, strategize without interference, and strike without warning. Your moves weren't predictable because they weren't tied to ego or image. They were tied to outcomes and timing. This separation also let you stay flexible. When your value isn't tied to others' acknowledgement, you can adjust, adapt, and pivot without fear of losing status or prestige. You weren't constrained by the need to protect an image of being smart. You could absorb criticism, study failures, and exploit contradictions in others without getting defensive. That freedom made your intellect sharper because it was constantly learning, constantly observing, constantly evolving without interference from your pride. By the time people realized how smart you were, it was too late. They had already misread you for months, even years, building confidence on the assumption that you were less capable than you actually were. Your intelligence had been working in silence, shaping outcomes and leveraging their mistakes. Keeping your intelligence unlinked from your identity isn't humility. It's strategy. It's freedom. It's the quiet kind of power that others can't see until it's already too late. You don't need to announce it, and that's why when it finally shows, it's devastatingly effective and utterly unstoppable. Number 9. You allowed them to underestimate your memory. Most people think memory is just a passive tool, something you pull out when needed. You treated it differently. You allowed others to believe that you forgot, that details slipped by, that words didn't stick. They assumed carelessness, a lack of focus, or even innocence. That assumption was exactly what you wanted. Underestimation is a weapon when paired with precision, and memory is the silent ammunition. Every slip of the tongue, every promise broken, every inconsistency, every small boast or threat was stored, not judged, but catalogued. You didn't just remember events. You remembered patterns, tendencies, habits, and the little cracks in people's facades. While they assumed their words were fleeting, they were being etched into your strategic map. People reveal more when they think no one is paying attention, and memory allows you to make every casual comment, every small action, every unguarded statement count. That kind of awareness doesn't just prepare you for future moves, it gives you leverage. Because when the right moment comes, you don't just recall events, you deploy them with perfect timing. Every inconsistency, every betrayal, every moment they thought they were safe becomes a tool for precision maneuvering. Memory also fuels your invisibility. People underestimate what you remember, which makes them careless around you. They speak freely, reveal weaknesses, and take risks, all believing that their missteps are temporary or unnoticed. Meanwhile, you silently hold the record. Their confidence, arrogance, and oversight give you a quiet advantage, one that can't be challenged or contested until it's too late. When you act, it's devastating because it's not just skill or strategy, it's history leveraged perfectly. The people who laughed, dismissed, or ignored your presence suddenly realize that nothing was forgotten, that every word, every move, every hint of arrogance has been noted and stored. Your memory became a silent ledger of advantage, and the checkmate arrives not because they underestimated your present ability, but because they underestimated the weight of everything you remembered. Allowing them to misjudge your memory isn't deceit, it's mastery. It turns oversight into opportunity and casual words into tools of precision. It's quiet, relentless, and completely unstoppable. Number 10. You understood that timing beats talent. Most people think that success comes from doing more, from being faster, or from having more skill. They rush, overexert, and try to prove themselves constantly, believing that movement equals advantage. You didn't play that game. You understood that timing is the silent force that multiplies talent far beyond raw ability. A move made too early can be wasted, a step taken too late can be useless, and effort spent without alignment is energy lost. You learned to wait, watch, and measure until the perfect moment arrived. Then you acted, and the impact was absolute. Timing gave you leverage. While others were burning themselves out on pointless contests, arguing over status, or trying to impress, you were observing, calculating, and predicting. You noticed patterns, habits, and reactions that everyone else overlooked because they were too busy performing to pay attention. They assumed being first or being fast mattered most, but you knew that influence comes from knowing when the board is ready, when resistance is weakest, and when your action will be decisive. That patience turned your moves into inevitability rather than chance. This mastery of timing also concealed your power. People thought you were behind, hesitant, or disengaged, while in reality you were positioning yourself with precision. Every delayed reaction, every silent observation, every pause was a strategic choice. You weren't indecisive, you were deliberate. And when you finally acted, it wasn't a gamble. It was a calculated strike that aligned with conditions they could not control or anticipate. By the time others realized what had happened, the advantage was irreversible. Their frantic speed and constant activity had only paved the way for your perfect execution. Talent alone never threatened them. Timing ensured that even average skill could dominate when aligned with the right moment. Understanding that timing beats talent isn't about patience for the sake of waiting. It's about control, leverage, and precision. It turns restraint into power and observation into victory. Those who act first without insight can't win against the one who knows exactly when to move. And that is why, in the end, your impact is inevitable, unavoidable, and unforgettable. Number 11. You didn't rush clarity, you let confusion work for you. Most people feel the need to explain themselves immediately, to make sure everyone understands their intentions, thoughts, and actions. They rush to clarify, fearing misinterpretation, believing that transparency equals control. You didn't. You understood that confusion can be a powerful tool when wielded correctly. By letting people misread you, second-guess themselves, and fill in gaps with their own assumptions, you created an environment where their decisions were influenced more by perception than by reality. Confusion forced them to project. They assumed motives, predicted actions, and interpreted your behavior through the lens of their own fears and desires. In doing so, they revealed more than they intended. Their projections exposed weaknesses, contradictions, and priorities that you could quietly record and leverage. Every misunderstanding became a source of information, every misjudgment a step closer to the advantage you had been building without ever revealing your hand. This strategy also gave you freedom. While they scrambled to make sense of you, you operated unburdened by their expectations. You didn't have to justify moves, defend choices, or explain intentions. You could act in alignment with strategy, not perception, and every small action you took carried weight precisely because it wasn't anticipated. Your silence, your ambiguity, and your neutral expressions created space for them to overthink, overreach, and miscalculate. By the time clarity finally emerged, it was too late for them to adjust. They had already made decisions based on false premises, and their momentum carried them into positions of vulnerability. Confusion, which they initially interpreted as weakness or indecision, turned into a force that worked entirely in your favor. Not rushing clarity isn't deception for the sake of trickery. It's mastery of influence. It allows perception to become a tool, mistakes to become opportunities, and hesitation to become your ally. By letting confusion work for you, you create a situation where others unknowingly contribute to your advantage, and the outcome, when revealed, feels inevitable, unassailable, and completely in your control. Number 12. You never showed the full map, only enough to mislead. Most people operate under the illusion that transparency equals trust, that showing everything you know will earn respect or prevent conflict. You didn't. You understood that revealing the full picture too early gives people time to react, adapt, and counter your strategy. Instead, you revealed only fragments, small hints, and carefully measured signals, enough to satisfy curiosity without exposing the real depth of your understanding. By controlling the flow of information, you shaped perception and allowed others to build confidence on incomplete data. This approach makes people overestimate what they know and underestimate you at the same time. They think they see the terrain clearly, but their view is filtered, partial, and misleading. Every detail you disclose is intentional, every omission deliberate. They interpret the fragments through their own biases, assumptions, and desires, which means the conclusions they draw about you are more about them than you, and the better they fill in the gaps, the more blind they become to the full strategy you've been quietly constructing. Keeping the full map hidden also gives you leverage in timing. While others scramble based on their incomplete understanding, you can move freely, anticipate their reactions, and adjust your plans in real time. Your moves appear sudden or unprovoked because they are informed by the full picture they've never been allowed to see. Meanwhile, they continue acting with confidence, never suspecting that their understanding is incomplete, inaccurate, and increasingly dangerous to their own position. This is not manipulation for the sake of deception. It's control over perception, timing, and consequence. By letting people believe they know more than they do, you create a situation where they contribute to their own downfall. When the moment comes to act, the fragments you've revealed become irrelevant. The full map, which has always been in your mind, allows you to execute with precision, while their assumptions collapse. Not showing the full map isn't secrecy, it's strategy. It turns incomplete perception into advantage, overconfidence into vulnerability, and your patience into inevitable dominance. The checkmate doesn't feel like it was plotted. It feels like it was always obvious, except it was only ever obvious to you. Number 13. You played long games in rooms obsessed with quick wins. Most people chase instant results. They measure success by applause, recognition, and immediate returns, exhausting themselves in competitions where speed matters more than strategy. You didn't. You played long games, quietly, deliberately, while everyone else rushed toward temporary victories. You understood that true leverage isn't gained by being first. It's gained by being right when the moment counts, and by building positions that endure long after others have burned out. Playing long games requires patience, discipline, and the ability to sit in discomfort. While others sought validation and reacted impulsively to every opportunity, you observed. You mapped patterns, tracked tendencies, and anticipated outcomes in a way that isn't visible to the impatient. You weren't ignoring the chaos around you. You were letting it unfold, letting people reveal their priorities, their weaknesses, their blind spots, and their overconfidence. Every rushed move by others became a step in your larger strategy, a piece of the puzzle that only made sense to you. This approach also gave you invisibility. People assumed they were ahead because they were active, visible, and vocal. They believed their short-term wins mattered more than your silent accumulation of insight and preparation. Their confidence made them predictable, even reckless. You didn't need to intervene or compete in their games because you weren't playing them. You were preparing for moments when quick reactions, loud displays, or surface-level intelligence wouldn't suffice. When the right time came to act, your moves carried weight and inevitability. People were blindsided not by your talent, but by the fact that they had been investing energy in fleeting contests while you were investing in permanence. Every mistake, every oversight, and every miscalculation they made over time became a tool in your hands, and your strategy unfolded with precision. Playing long games isn't about waiting passively. It's about using patience, observation, and foresight as weapons. It turns others' urgency into advantage, short-sightedness into leverage, and time into your ally. In a world obsessed with quick wins, the one who thinks decades ahead holds power that no immediate success can touch. You didn't just play smarter, you played beyond their timeline. Number 14. They didn't lose to you. They lost to who they thought you were. Most people believe defeat comes from skill, strength, or direct confrontation. They assume the person across from them was the agent of their failure. You didn't need to fight that way. The real power wasn't in what you did, it was in what they believed you were. They built a version of you in their minds, a simplified, incomplete, and ultimately false picture. That version fit their assumptions, their ego, and their sense of control. They lost not because of your moves alone, but because they trusted a reality that never existed. This misperception gave you an invisible advantage. While they operated confidently within the limits of their imagination, you were operating in reality, armed with full awareness, strategy, and patience. Every error they made, every miscalculation, every overconfidence stemmed from this false understanding. They were, unknowingly, playing a game against a shadow, not the real player. And that shadow wasn't empty. It was a map of their weaknesses, a record of their tendencies, a blueprint for inevitable outcomes. By letting them misread you, you turned their assumptions into a weapon against them. They underestimated your timing, ignored your restraint, and misjudged your intelligence. Their arrogance blinded them to the fact that the person they thought they were facing was merely a mask. They thought they had space to maneuver, freedom to dominate, and insight to predict you. Every choice they made based on that false image carried them deeper into positions of vulnerability. When reality finally revealed itself, it wasn't a single action that defeated them. It was the accumulation of every misjudgment, every wrong assumption, every lapse of caution that they created themselves. The shock wasn't in your skill. It was in their realization that the game they thought they understood was never theirs to control. People don't always lose to what's real. They often lose to what they imagine. And by keeping your true self hidden until the right moment, you ensure that when the curtain falls, the checkmate isn't just your victory. It's the proof that their misperception, their assumptions, and their blind confidence were the true architects of their own downfall. The checkmate was always silent. Every move you made, every word you withheld, every observation you recorded, every moment you waited patiently. It wasn't random. It was strategy. You allowed people to misclassify you, underestimated by their own assumptions. You compressed your awareness, conserving energy while they burned theirs in noise and ego. You avoided pointless contests, letting arrogance and overconfidence fill the gaps for you. You let them talk themselves into false superiority, misjudging every pause, every blank expression, every silent moment. You studied outcomes instead of opinions, kept intelligence unlinked from ego, and allowed memory to archive everything they overlooked. Timing became your weapon, confusion your ally, and partial disclosure your unseen power. You played long games in rooms obsessed with quick wins, and when the moment came, they didn't just lose. They lost to the version of you they imagined, never the reality they failed to see. This isn't about arrogance. It's about mastery. It's about understanding the psychology of perception, patience, and precision. It's about realizing that real power doesn't demand recognition, doesn't shout, and doesn't need to justify itself. It quietly accumulates, silently positions, and executes with inevitability. Every underestimated smile, every blank face, every subtle action was building a force that couldn't be ignored once fully revealed. And when it did, the outcome wasn't luck. It was the product of observation, discipline, and strategy perfected over time. If you found yourself thinking differently, seeing situations in a new way, or feeling the weight of understanding power like this, you're not alone. This isn't just theory. It's a blueprint for thinking beyond assumptions and operating with invisible influence. If this opened your mind or gave you that aha moment, make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button if this resonated, drop a comment to share your thoughts, and share this with someone who needs to see it. Mastery is contagious. Let's grow it together. Stay awakened, chosen ones.